Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to show you how to grow sunflowers from seed. This is an easy beginner's guide, so I'm going to keep it fairly simple and the video quite short as well. If you do want a more in-depth video though, I'll leave a link at the end and I'll show you how you can grow the absolute biggest possible sunflowers. So first of all, you need to get your seeds. These can be seeds that you've either collected yourself or you've bought from a packet of seeds. Now once you've got your seeds, what you want to do is you want to pick your largest one. Now there might be white like these ones here, or there might be black. There's different ones, different varieties. Some of them have stripes as well. But you just want to get your seed and you want to pick the largest one in the packet, because the bigger the seed, the more energy it has for germination and growing, and it'll just give you a faster, better head start to your plant. So once you've picked your biggest seeds, you want to make sure you've got a few of them. When it comes to growing sunflowers, you want to grow a few at a time. You can grow them individually, but the problem is if that seed doesn't germinate, you'll then have to start the whole process again. And if that plant gets eaten later on, or somebody steps on it, or a dog runs over it, then you've lost that plant. So it's always good to have a few backups just in case. Now I'll also talk about the time that you need to plant your sunflowers. So the time of your sunflower doesn't matter too much when you sow it. You can sow it any time really from a month before the last frost. So in most places in the northern hemisphere it could be March time you're sowing your sunflower seed, and you can sow it as late as July and you'll still get some flowering probably September time. If you have got warmer autumns, you don't get the frost until quite late, you can actually sow as late as August and you'll still get a flowering plant. So even if it's kind of like the middle of summer, you still might not be too late depending where you live to sow the sunflowers and still get some nice flowers. So now you've got your seeds ready, it's time to put them in a pot. So when it comes to pot size, it doesn't matter too much, just make sure it's around about this size, maybe a size of a coffee mug, something like that. You don't want a really small one because then it's hard to look after it because it doesn't have the space for its roots, and you don't want an absolutely massive one because you'll be planting this out in the garden later on, or you'll be transplanting it into a bigger pot later on. And what you need to do is you need to fill it up with compost, but before that make sure that your container does have drainage holes. So you can see this one for example has holes for drainage there. If you don't have drainage in your pot, the problem is the water will collect in the bottom, it will become too wet and the seeds will just rot or the plants will die. So when it comes to soil choice, you can use nearly anything really because sunflowers aren't very fussy. I would recommend going for multi-purpose compost if you can. That's what I'm using today. You can see I've got some nice rich multi-purpose compost. Just has a little bit more feed in it so that plants have a better head start. But if you can't get your hands on any multi-purpose compost, you can just go with garden soil. That would be fine. You just have to realise there might be a few weeds that come up as well as the sunflower. So you just want to fill up your pot almost to the top. So I'll just do that now with mine. Now you just want to gently put the soil in. You don't want to pack it in hard or anything. Just loosely fill it up to the surface like that. You can give it a slight tamp down if it's very loose. One good way of doing that is just to tap the pot like that. If you push down too hard, you can have compaction issues. So once you've done that, it's time to plant your seed. There's a couple of ways you can plant it. Now fortunately sunflowers are pretty robust plants and easy to grow from seed, so you don't have to worry too much about the planting. You can either push it into the ground with your fingers, or you can use a pen or a pencil and poke a hole and then put it in that hole. The only thing that you do need to think about is the orientation of the seed. Again, being robust plants, it's not the end of the world if you don't plant it the right way up, but you'll just get a slightly better head start and possibly slightly better germination as well if you do plant it up the right way. So I'll show you here. This is a sunflower seed. Some sunflower seeds are longer or shorter than this, but they tend to be longer than they are wide. And what you're looking for is there's a point at one end and there's a flatter bit at the other end. That flatter section needs to be facing up, the pointy end needs to be going down. So you can just think of it as it's a nice pointy shape, it will easily push through the soil, and that flat bit you can push against your finger when you push it into the soil and it's not going to hurt you. So that's the way of thinking of it. Pointy end goes down, that's where the root comes out. So I'm just going to pop it in the surface like this, just on the top there, and then once it's on the surface I'm just going to get my finger and push it down probably about half an inch or an inch, and then once it's in just cover it with soil like that. I'll also show you how to do it with a pencil or a pen if you're doing that as well. All you do is get the pen or pencil, push down in the ground to make a little hollow, again go about half an inch or so, and then you just drop the seed in, making sure that it's pointing down just like that, and then cover it up with soil afterwards. So now that you've sown your seeds, the next thing you need to do is water the pot, give it a good soak. Make sure the compost and soil is nice and wet, and you just need to make sure that it's not too wet. But it's, as I say, sunflowers are easy to grow. It's not hard to get it right. All you need to make sure is that when you do water it, any excess water can come out the bottom. As long as the excess water can come out the bottom, it shouldn't be too wet for the plant. So give it a good soak. put it on maybe a tray or a saucer to catch that water, and then throw that water away, put the saucer back. If any more water appears, throw it away again, and keep doing that until no more water comes out the bottom of the pot. Now when it comes to watering, give it a good soak once, and then you probably won't need to water it again because sunflowers do germinate quite quickly. The next thing to do is to put it on a warm sunny windowsill, ideally south facing, whatever windowsill you have that is the sunniest, and then you should notice germination in about 1 week's time. And once it germinates, then you'll just need to keep an eye on the soil and make sure it's kept damp and that it doesn't dry out completely. So after 2 or 3 weeks after germination, this is what your sunflower should look like. So what you'll see when it first germinates, the seed will actually come up with the stalk. The seed becomes these 2 little leaves here, and then the rest of the leaves of the plant will start to grow. Now as it's growing on the windowsill, because the light is only coming from one direction, what you will need to do is rotate this plant. What will happen is it will lean towards the window because that's where most of the light is. So when you look at your plant, it's leaning this way and the window is on this side. What you need to do is rotate it so it's leaning away from the window, and that way when it gets the sun, it will try and track up to it again and it will straighten up the plant for you. So if it does start to lean, just rotate it every now and again. Make sure it's always leaning away from the window, and the light will make it naturally lean back towards the window. That way you'll have a nice straight plant, and after about 2 or 3 weeks it'll be ready to plant outside or in a bigger pot. So you can see this one here, it's got a decent size compared with the size of the pot. It's definitely ready for repotting. Now if anything, I would have repotted it probably more about this height. I'll just let it grow a little bit taller. It's definitely ready to go out into the garden or into its final pot. So I'll take you outside now and I'll show you how to plant it and what kind of depth to plant it at as well. So when it comes to planting location for your sunflower, you want to make sure it's a really nice sunny location. The sunnier the better. Also someone that's a little bit sheltered from the wind, because once this gets really tall, the wind can quite easily blow it over. And these conditions are the same if it's in the soil or if it's in a pot. When you do plant it in a pot, make sure it's a bigger pot as possible. If you want a really large sunflower, you need a very large pot. But if you're growing dwarf varieties, or if you don't mind a sunflower being smaller, a small pot will do. You'll just need to water it more often, that's all. So this is where I'm going to be planting mine. This is a nice sunny location in my garden. First thing to do is, if you have any weeds or anything like that, make sure you take all the weeds out. The weeds will just compete with the roots, so make sure the soil is removed of any weeds. So now we've got some bare soil. The next thing you want to do is, if you've got a fork or a spade, you want to dig in some compost and also dig in some slow release fertilizer. This isn't a necessary step, but you will get much larger sunflowers if you do this. So when it comes to adding compost, the more the better pretty much. It will just make your soil much richer or hold much more water and nutrients. When it comes to fertilizer though, make sure you use the right amount for the type of fertilizer you have, because too much will actually be harming the plant. But you do want a good amount of fertilizer as well to make sure you get maximum growth. And then just dig it into the soil, ideally using a spade or a fork, and you want to dig it in really quite deep as well. I'm just doing a small planting hole as a demonstration, but if you were to use a full-size spade, dig it about 2 foot deep would be the ideal for perfect soil. And if you want to find out more about having the absolutely best soil for your sunflower, you can watch my other video where I go into a lot more detail about soil preparation. So once the soil is nice and loose, you're ready to go ahead and plant your plant. Put it in the position where you're going to have it, so you know where to start digging. You then want to dig a hole just a tiny bit bigger than your existing pot, and you can just check by placing your sunflower in if it's the correct level or not. And when it comes to the planting height with sunflowers, it's quite easy to tell what height to plant them at. So you can see here on the sunflower there's 2 different types of stem. You've got the lower stem here, which is smooth and darker, and the upper stem here, which is very hairy and it's more of a green colour. So you don't want to plant it above these 2 first sets of leaves, although these might fall off, so go by the stem colour and the hairs to tell where to plant. Don't ever plant higher than these here. But when it comes to planting, you can plant it the same height as it is in the pot now, or you can plant it deeper up to the height of those leaves. So that's the variation you have in the planting. Depending on the plant, that could be up to 5-10 centimeters, several inches in height difference. So don't worry too much about planting depth, as long as you don't cover up the hairy part of the stem, and as long as you don't have it sitting higher than what it is already in the pot. So to get out of the pot, you just tip your plant upside down, push gently on the bottom if you have a plastic pot. If your pot isn't plastic, you can just kind of shake it and kind of jostle it out. It should come out like that. You then just want to gently place this in the planting hole, then infill around it with the compost. Whilst you're doing this, if it's at an angle like that, just set it up so it's straight and hold it straight whilst you're planting it, just to make sure that it will stay straight once it's fully planted. And earthing up the soil around the stem will help if you have a very leggy plant that's falling over. and you just want to very gently firm around it just to make sure that it's not going to get blown over by the wind, but you don't want to stamp it down hard with your foot, otherwise it becomes too compacted and it's not good for the roots. And all you need to do now is give it a really good soak with a watering can and it's good to go. Now when it comes to the aftercare of your sunflowers over the summer, when it comes to watering, if it's in the soil, you can't really overwater it. Any excess water will just go down deeper into the soil, so you can't overwater an in the ground plant. If it's in a pot though, just make sure the water can drain out the pot freely, because if it doesn't come out the bottom of the pot well, it is possible to overwater them. Now when it comes to sunflowers, they can tolerate dry conditions, but the more you water them, the bigger the plant will be. Also, if you give them some liquid feed throughout the summer, you'll also get much bigger plants as well. And once they get to a decent size, probably about 2 or 3 foot in height, you might want to think about using some stakes to stabilize them. Just get a bamboo cane, put it in the ground next to it, and tie it on with some twine or some string, and that will just stop it from getting damaged from the worst of the winds. So that's it for this video, just a very quick simple video on how to grow sunflowers. If you want a lot more in-depth one, as I say, I have got a whole series about growing sunflowers if you want to grow the absolute biggest possible.